The sound of the checkout scanner punctuated the monotony of Evelyn's week. It was the same routine every Friday. A stroll through the grocery aisles, her cart half filled with items for one. The soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the faint whiff of cleaning detergent in the air had become her companions in solitude. At 54, Evelyn's life was a quiet rhythm of predictability. Her children were grown, her husband long gone, and her days filled with routines so fixed they felt etched in stone. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders as she reached for a jar of marinara sauce on the top shelf. It wasn't that she couldn't reach it, just that she felt the world rarely offered to reach for her anymore. Life, as it turned out, could be stubbornly practical, no longer offering surprises. "Here, let me get that for you." The voice was smooth, tinged with warmth. Evelyn turned, startled. A young man, perhaps 30 at most, stood there, a faint smile lighting up his face. He grabbed the jar effortlessly and handed it to her, his eyes meeting hers with a sincerity that caught her off guard. "Oh, thank you," she murmured, her voice faltering slightly. She felt an unexpected heat creep into her cheeks. "It's no problem," he replied casually. "I'm tall. Might as well use it for good." There was a twinkle in his eye, as though he found joy in the smallest gestures. Evelyn gave a polite laugh, though her heart fluttered in a way she hadn't expected. She glanced at him again as he turned back to his cart, a plain one with just a few essentials. His sandy brown hair was slightly tousled, his movements unhurried, as though life hadn't yet taught him to rush. The moment should have ended there, like every other polite interaction with strangers in the store. But it didn't. Their paths crossed again in the bread aisle, then the produce section. By the time Evelyn reached the checkout, he was in the line beside hers, offering her a friendly nod as he placed his items on the conveyor belt. "Are you a creature of habit too? Or do we just happen to have the same shopping route?" he asked, his voice light with humor. Evelyn hesitated, unsure how to respond to his casual familiarity. "Maybe a little of both," she admitted, her lips curving into a small smile. "Though I'm here every Friday like clockwork." "Good to know," he said, grinning. "I'll be sure to say hi next time." The interaction was brief, over before Evelyn could fully process it. But as she walked to her car, her bags weighing down her arms, she realized something unexpected. The encounter had left her lighter, as though she'd been reminded that her world wasn't as closed off as she believed. Later that evening, as she unpacked her groceries, she caught herself replaying the moment, the kindness in his voice, the ease in his smile. It was ridiculous, she told herself. He was young, friendly, probably like that with everyone. And yet, as she sat down to her solitary dinner, Evelyn couldn't shake the small flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. A spark the following Friday. Evelyn hesitated before heading out, feeling uncharacteristically self-conscious. Her reflection in the mirror gave her pause as she smoothed her hair and adjusted her scarf, wondering why she suddenly cared about her appearance for a trip to the grocery store. It was silly, she told herself. Utterly silly. Yet, as she stepped out the door, she realized she hoped, just a little, that she might see him again. The store was as it always was, bustling but quiet in its way, the sound of wheels on tiled floors and murmured conversations filling the air. Evelyn wandered the aisles, lingering more than usual, scanning the shelves with feigned purpose. And then in the cereal aisle, she heard his voice. "Back for round 2 of our synchronized shopping routine." Evelyn turned to see him standing there, holding a box of granola, his smile as warm and genuine as before. She laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. It seems we're both creatures of habit after all. Over the next few weeks, their brief exchanges at the store became a regular occurrence. Evelyn learned his name, Leo, and bits of his life. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, enjoyed hiking, and had a penchant for cooking, often experimenting with dishes he would share with friends. Their conversations grew longer, spilling beyond casual pleasantries. One Friday, as they stood near the checkout, Evelyn mentioned she had always wanted to learn to cook something more adventurous but had never had the confidence. Leo's face lit up. "Then you should come to the farmer's market tomorrow," he suggested. "They've got the best produce, and it's a lot more fun than this place. I could show you around." Evelyn hesitated. The idea was tempting, but the thought of spending time with him outside the grocery store felt different. "I wouldn't want to intrude," she said softly, trying to mask the nervous flutter in her chest. "You wouldn't be," he assured her. Besides, it's always better with company. The next morning, Evelyn found herself wandering through the farmer's market beside Leo, the vibrant colors of fresh produce and the lively chatter of vendors creating a world that felt far removed from her usual routine. Leo guided her with enthusiasm, pointing out his favorite stalls and sharing cooking tips that made her laugh. At one point, he handed her a bright yellow pepper, their fingers brushing. The moment was fleeting but enough to leave her breathless. By the end of the morning, Evelyn had a bag full of fresh ingredients and a mind buzzing with the memory of his easy smile and the way he had brought such joy into an otherwise ordinary day. As she unpacked her finds at home, she realized something unexpected. Her world, once so small and predictable, was starting to feel a little bigger. And Leo was the reason why. Evelyn wasn't sure when her feelings for Leo began to shift. At first, it was easy to chalk everything up to his kindness, his light-hearted charm. But as the weeks passed, her excitement over their interactions grew, a quiet hum beneath the surface of her days. It wasn't just his warmth that drew her in, it was the way he made her feel seen, as though she were more than the sum of her years and routines. With Leo, she laughed more freely, shared stories she hadn't told anyone in years, and, for the first time in what felt like forever, imagined possibilities instead of limitations. One evening, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, a recipe card in hand and the ingredients from their farmer's market trip spread out before her. She had mentioned wanting to try a simple risotto, and Leo had insisted on walking her through it step by step over the phone. "Okay, stir slowly." His voice came through the speaker, rich with patience. "You want it creamy but not mushy. Perfect risotto is all about balance." Evelyn chuckled as she stirred the pot. "I don't know how you make this sound so easy." "Because it is easy," he teased. "You're overthinking it, Evelyn. Trust yourself a little." His words struck a chord, the deeper meaning not lost on her. She glanced at the risotto and then at her reflection in the kitchen window. A woman who had spent years doubting herself, waiting for life to hand her permission to dream again. When they hung up, Evelyn sat at the table, the creamy risotto before her, and the emptiness of the room pressing in. She realized she wished Leo were there, sitting across from her, laughing and sharing the meal they'd created together. The thought startled her, and with it came the clarity she had been avoiding. She cared for him, deeply. The realization was like a lightning bolt. It wasn't just gratitude for his kindness or admiration for his passion. It was something more profound, something that made her heart race and her chest tighten all at once. Her mind raced with protests. "He's so much younger. It's just a passing infatuation. He probably doesn't think of you that way." Yet, no matter how she tried to rationalize it, the truth lingered. That night, Evelyn lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as waves of doubt and longing crashed over her. The idea of having feelings for someone like Leo was thrilling and terrifying all at once. But beneath the fear was a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. And that hope was enough to keep her awake, her thoughts circling one undeniable truth. Leo had awakened something in her that she had long thought dormant. Evelyn found herself caught between exhilaration and fear. Her feelings for Leo had grown into something undeniable, yet every time she considered what they might mean, a wave of doubt rushed in. She spent her mornings sipping coffee at the kitchen table, staring out at the garden that had once brought her solace. Now it felt like a reminder of her solitude, of the life she had resigned herself to, until Leo had walked into it. The age difference loomed large in her mind. She imagined the whispers, the raised eyebrows, the silent judgments from strangers and acquaintances alike. What would her children say? Her friends? Would Leo even want more than friendship? One afternoon, as she rearranged books on the shelf in her living room, a futile attempt to distract herself, her phone buzzed. A message from Leo. "Leo, you have to see this. Found something amazing at the market today." The accompanying picture was of a vibrant bundle of heirloom carrots, their colors as vivid as his enthusiasm. Evelyn smiled despite herself. "Evelyn, they're beautiful. What's the plan for them?" "Leo, not sure yet. Maybe you can help me figure it out." Her heart leaped. His words felt like an invitation, and yet she hesitated. Could she trust what she was feeling? What if she was reading too much into his gestures? As the days passed, her inner conflict deepened. When she saw Leo, She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. His laughter, his energy, his sheer presence lit up corners of her heart she thought had long gone dark. But when she was alone, the doubts crept in. One evening, as she walked through the park near her home, Evelyn found herself imagining what it would feel like to walk there with Leo, to talk freely, to share the quiet beauty of the place. The thought filled her with both longing and fear. She paused at a bench overlooking a small pond, her thoughts swirling. Why is it so hard to just feel this? She wondered. She had spent so much of her life being practical, cautious, holding herself back to avoid disappointment. But Leo had awakened something raw and unguarded in her, a desire to embrace the unknown, even if it scared her. A pair of joggers passed, their laughter floating on the breeze, and Evelyn felt a pang of envy. They seemed so free, unburdened by the weight of expectations. She realized that her own hesitation wasn't just about Leo, it was about herself, about her fear of stepping outside the life she'd meticulously curated to avoid heartbreak. When she returned home, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. She saw the lines of age and experience, the woman she had become through decades of joy and pain. And yet, beneath it all, she still saw the girl who had once believed in magic, in the possibility of love that defied reason. For the first time in years, Evelyn allowed herself to wonder, what if? What if she could let go of her fear, let herself feel without apology? What if, against all odds, this connection with Leo was something real, something worth risking everything for? The thought lingered, warming her like a fragile ember in the cold. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let fear hold her back forever. The decision crept up on Evelyn like the first light of dawn, soft yet undeniable. She couldn't keep pretending her feelings for Leo were insignificant, nor could she ignore the way he had gently but persistently unraveled the protective walls she had spent years building around herself. The idea of inviting him to her home felt monumental, almost absurd. She hadn't entertained anyone in years, let alone a man who made her pulse race and her thoughts spiral into uncharted territory. The catalyst came one Friday at the grocery store, where their usual banter had taken a slightly deeper turn. "You know," Leo said, holding up a bunch of fresh basil, "I've never mastered making pesto from scratch. I always mess up the proportions somehow." Evelyn tilted her head, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's really not that hard. You just need the right balance of garlic and cheese." "Balance, huh? That's your answer to everything." "Well, it's true," she countered, her tone playful. Leo studied her for a moment, his expression softening. "Maybe you could show me sometime." The question was casual, yet it landed like a jolt in Evelyn's chest. She hesitated, her mind racing with possibilities. "Maybe I could," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. That evening, as she sat alone in her kitchen, the weight of his words lingered. Could she do it? Could she bring him into her space, her sanctuary? The thought made her both excited and apprehensive. She stared at her phone, his contact name staring back at her. She had saved it weeks ago after one of their market outings, but this would be the first time she initiated a meeting. After several deep breaths and a pep talk to herself, she typed out the message. "Evelyn, if you're free this weekend, I could show you how to make that pesto. My kitchen is small but functional." Her finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. When she finally tapped it, her heart leaped into her throat. The minutes stretched painfully, her mind conjuring every possible scenario in which she might decline. The phone buzzed. "Leo, are you kidding? I'd love that. Just tell me when to show up." The relief and joy that washed over her were almost overwhelming. She smiled, her chest warm with anticipation. The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. She cleaned every corner of her small home, stocked up on ingredients, and even bought a new set of dish towels, laughing at herself for caring about such trivial details. By the time Sunday afternoon arrived, Evelyn stood in her kitchen, nervously smoothing her apron as she waited for the knock at the door. When it came, her breath hitched, but she forced herself to steady. When she opened the door, there he was, holding a small bouquet of herbs, basil, rosemary, and thyme, their fragrance fresh and inviting. "Thought I'd contribute to the cause," he said with a grin. Evelyn laughed, stepping aside to let him in. "You're already making a good impression." As he entered her space, filling it with his presence, Evelyn felt both exposed and alive. This was her home, her world, and now, for the first time in years, she was sharing it with someone who mattered. The kitchen felt alive with warmth as Leo set the herbs down on the counter, his hands moving with easy confidence as he began to unpack his small bag of ingredients. Evelyn was grateful for the quiet ease between them, the way their movements naturally synced, like two people who had been sharing a space for years, even if only in this one small moment. Leo glanced at her, his eyes catching hers with a spark of playful mischief. "So, do you really think you can teach me to make pesto? Or should I prepare for a disaster?" Evelyn couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at the sound of his voice. "I'm confident, but I wouldn't mind a disaster. A little chaos makes cooking fun." As they moved around the kitchen together, Evelyn noticed how easy it was to be near him. The air between them was charged in a way that wasn't just about the meal they were preparing. It was about the quiet intimacy of sharing something real. Leo's laughter, the way he leaned in to watch her chop the garlic, the gentle way his fingers brushed against hers as he passed her a bowl. It was all so simple, yet profoundly intimate. They worked in tandem, and the kitchen, despite its cramped space, felt expansive. Every time their hands brushed or their eyes met across the counter, a quiet understanding bloomed between them. It was a dance of sorts, one without words, without the need for explanation. Just the two of them in this shared space, creating something together. When they finally sat down to eat, the pesto was surprisingly perfect, creamy, fragrant, and just the right amount of garlic. They savored the meal in comfortable silence, the kind that spoke volumes without needing to fill every pause with words. Afterward, they lingered at the table, sipping wine, the soft hum of the evening settling around them. Leo's eyes met hers again, his expression open, vulnerable in a way that made Evelyn's heart beat a little faster. "You know," Leo said quietly, setting his glass down, "I never thought I'd find myself spending a Sunday afternoon making pesto with someone much older than me." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat, and her throat tightened at his words. The vulnerability she felt mirrored his. There was an unspoken weight in the air, an acknowledgement of the difference between them. It was as if he had read her mind, touched the very thing she had been trying to keep hidden from both of them. But then, to her surprise, Leo smiled, soft, tender, and it was as though a weight lifted between them. "I'm glad it's with you, though. I've never had this kind of connection before." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined that Leo, so full of life and possibility, could feel this way about her. Her mind raced with doubts, but his smile was steadying, anchoring her in the moment. She placed her hand on the table, palm up, and for the briefest moment, they sat there, just looking at each other. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Leo reached over and took her hand in his. The touch was gentle but sure, a quiet affirmation of what had been growing between them. It wasn't a confession, not yet, but it was a promise, a shared moment that spoke louder than any words could. Evelyn squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with an emotion she couldn't name, both tender and fierce, both cautious and overwhelming. For the first time in ages, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, her heart open to the possibility of something more. And as the evening stretched on, the weight of their connection deepened. It wasn't about the pesto or the wine. It was about the way Leo made her feel, the way he saw her, and how, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to let herself be seen. The following days were a blur of thoughts and emotions that Evelyn couldn't quite untangle. There was a quiet joy that lingered after Leo left her home, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. But alongside that joy came something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling. She found herself thinking about their moments together, about the touch of his hand, the depth in his eyes, and the way their connection had evolved in such a short span of time. She walked through her house in the days that followed, the walls somehow feeling smaller, more intimate now that Leo had crossed into her life. The house that had once seemed so large in her solitude felt like a space brimming with untold possibilities. And yet, with each passing hour, the reality of their age difference weighed heavier on her mind. Was it foolish to pursue something so unpredictable, so defiant of societal norms? She had always played by the rules, settling into a quiet life, making peace with her solitude. What was she doing now? What was this feeling stirring in her chest? As she sat at her desk that evening, looking over old photographs, Evelyn thought of the years that had shaped her, of the love she had once known, of the lessons life had taught her about the fleeting nature of time. She had loved deeply before, had felt the euphoria of connection, the heartbreak of loss. She had seen her body age, seen her children grow into adults of their own, and had come to terms with the changes of life. But this felt different. He was a reminder of what she had buried under layers of fear and self-doubt. He was a glimpse into something unexpected, something bold and reckless in the best way. Her mind drifted back to the moments they had shared, to the softness in his voice when he'd spoken about the connection between them. It was impossible to ignore the way he made her feel alive, the way he celebrated her. Every word he spoke seemed to affirm her worth in a way she had almost forgotten to believe. Maybe this isn't about age at all, Evelyn thought. Maybe it's about love, about what two people share when they are brave enough to let go of their fears and simply be present with one another. Her hand wandered to her chest, as though trying to steady the pounding of her heart. I've spent so much of my life being cautious, making peace with the predictable. But what if love doesn't need to follow the rules? She thought about the way he had looked at her, the way he had touched her hand with such tenderness and hope. She had never felt so seen, so understood. It wasn't the age difference that mattered. It was the connection, the shared understanding, and the tenderness they had discovered together. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, a deep sigh escaping her lips. There would always be whispers, always be questions about their age, about what was acceptable and what was not. But none of that had ever truly mattered to her before, and it wouldn't now. The love she had for her children, for her friends, had never been dictated by any convention. Maybe, she realized, love was simply love, timeless and uncontainable. The realization settled deep in her heart, and in that moment, Evelyn allowed herself to embrace it fully. She wasn't just an older woman who had found herself infatuated with a younger man. She was a woman who had found a love that transcended boundaries, that defied expectations, that was born from something as simple and profound as connection. And that, she decided, was worth every risk the next time Leo came to visit. Evelyn opened the door with a newfound sense of peace. There was no hesitation now, no nervous flutter in her chest. She had let go of the doubts, the fears that had clung to her for so long. There was only the quiet joy of knowing that whatever happened next, she was ready to embrace it. They spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and cooking together again. Each moment felt richer than the last, like the world had shifted just enough to reveal something beautiful and unspoken between them. As they sat together at the kitchen table, sharing a simple meal and a bottle of wine, Evelyn realized that she had finally let herself be vulnerable, not just with Leo but with herself. She had spent so much of her life protecting her heart, keeping it safe from hurt and disappointment. But in doing so, she had also kept it from feeling the depth of connection and joy that came with opening up to another person. With Leo, she had learned to be braver, to let go of the walls she had built and to trust that love could take many forms, even unexpected ones. As the evening wore on, Leo's eyes softened as he reached across the table, taking her hand once more. This time, there was no uncertainty, no hesitation. They both knew what this was, what it could be. "I never imagined I'd feel this way," Leo murmured, his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. "But I'm glad I do. Glad I met you." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. "Me too." And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about age or expectations or the judgment of others. She was just living in the moment, embracing the love that had found her when she least expected it. Love, she realized, had no expiration date. It didn't care about age or the number of years between two people. It was as timeless as the moments they shared. The quiet mornings, the laughter over a meal, the softness of a touch that said more than words ever could. In the days to come, Evelyn would face the world with a new perspective. She would not apologize for what she had found. Instead, she would let her heart lead her, knowing that love, in all its forms, was something to be cherished, something worth pursuing, no matter the obstacles or the judgments of others. For love was not bound by time, and neither was she. And as long as she followed her heart, she knew she would never be alone again.